Greetings, everyone. Thanks for joining for Mongolian Evaluation Association's first monthly learning session for the year 2024. My name is and I'm a founder and president of Mongolian Evaluation Association. We are a national voluntary organization for professional evaluation, also known as WOPE, founded in 2021 with the vision to promote professionalization and institutionalization of evaluation at national level in Mongolia. Now I'm very pleased to introduce to you our distinguished speakers and panelists. Our first speaker is Dr. Michael Bamberger. He has a PhD in sociology from the London School of Economics. Following 10 years of working with the NGOs on urban and community development in Latin America, he worked for 20 years with the World Bank on gender and development, urban development, and coordinating evaluation capacity of development in Africa and Asia. Since retiring from the World Bank, he has consulted on development evaluation with the UN agencies, development banks, bilateral development agencies, and NGOs. He was on the faculty of International Program for Development Evaluation, IPDED, for 15 years, and the Foundation for Advanced Studies in International Development in Tokyo for 10 years. He is currently a senior research fellow at the International Initiative on Impact Evaluation and an advisor on evaluation to the Independent Evaluation Office of the United Nations Development Program and the Internal Oversight Office of the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations. In recent years, he has worked on incorporating a complexity focus on development evaluation, the challenges and opportunity for integrating big data into evaluation, and gender and social inclusion. He has published extensively, some of which are real-world evaluation, dealing with complexity in development evaluation, impact evaluation of UN habitat housing approach to adequate affordable housing and poverty reduction, measuring results and impact in the age of big data, the nexus of evaluation and analytics in digital technology, among others. We are very honored to have you, Dr. Michael Bamberger, with us today. Our second speaker is Dr. Raymond Gervais. He has a PhD from University of Paris and has 35 years of experience in evaluation and research for dozens of multilateral and bilateral organizations. From planning to monitoring in education, health, and infrastructure, he then developed expertise in evaluation, participating in or leading teams mandated to evaluate in a very broad spectrum of sectors and countries. In recent years, he has moved to volunteer work on humanitarian interventions such as floods, earthquakes, and epidemic, especially during the pandemic in his own country, Canada. In 2018 to 2023, he worked with the Global Affairs Canada-funded Mongolia, enhancing resource management through institutional transformation, also known as Merit Program of Mongolia. We are indeed very fortunate to have you, Dr. Raymond, with us today. So for this learning session, we also have a discussant who is a Mongolian lady among us, and her name is Ms. Nandinchimig Maksar. She is a member of Mongolian Evaluation Association, and she holds a master's degree in public health science and medical science in bachelor from the Mongolian National University of Medical Science. Ms. Nandinchimig has more than 15 years of experience in monitoring and evaluation. She worked as a many specialist and manager at World Vision International Mongolia from 2007 and 2017. She has worked on nationwide projects, programs funded by Asian Development Bank, World Bank, KfW, EBRD, etc., as a monitoring and evaluation expert and independent evaluator. So surely she is one of the very experienced few evaluators in Mongolia. And we are very truly happy to have all these international and national very experienced evaluators with us. So we look forward to a very fruitful learning session. And so procedure is now our speakers will do their presentation, and then Ms. Nandin Chimuk will have reaction and some comments and based on Mongolia's experience, based on her own experience. And then we will have a Q&A session, and then hopefully we will do it within 1.5 hours. Usually with these great presenters, we often go over time, but hopefully we will do better time management this time. So without further ado, I now give the floor to Dr. Michael Bamberger.
So good evening to everybody, and thank you to our moderator for the introduction. This is the fourth and final session which Raymond Gervais and I have done, covering a range of monitoring and evaluation topics and drawing on the international experience to discuss how these would relate to the situation in Mongolia. So we're just going to spend 5 minutes to rapidly review what we've covered in the previous 3 sessions, and then the theme for this session is talking about program and project evaluation. So very briefly, we have tried to bring in international experience on monitoring and evaluation, a number of different issues from countries around the world, and then talking about how these relate to the situation in Mongolia, where there's increasing interest in developing monitoring and evaluation systems. So in the first session, which was about 6 months ago now, we talked about the importance of understanding the complexity dimensions of evaluation, that all evaluations take place in a complex environment, and even what seems a simple program is affected by the complex interrelations between all of the different stakeholders who may have different priorities and approaches to evaluation. It's also affected by the external environment, the economic, the social, the political, the international environment in which programs take place. And also programs themselves are often complex. They have many different dimensions, different indicators. They take place in different parts of the country where the situation may be different. So we began by developing an approach to thinking about complex evaluations, and we gave the example of programs for poverty alleviation in Mongolia. We talked about some of the income transfer programs as an example of complexity. In the second session, we applied complexity to thinking about how you evaluate gender-based violence programs, and we gave the example of a program in El Salvador to show all of the different dimensions which come in when you're trying to develop and assessing a program to address gender-based violence. You have to work at the community level, the municipal level. They had to coordinate with the police, with the mass media, and a number of activities at the national level. So this was an example of how complexity needs to be incorporated into development programs. So those were the first 2 sessions, and the plan for the third and fourth sessions was to talk in the third session about program monitoring, and today we'll be talking about program evaluation. And so I would like to ask my colleague Raymond Gervais just to very briefly summarize what we discussed in the third session about program monitoring and how this applies to Mongolia. And then we'll go on to talking about the theme for today, the program evaluation. So Raymond, if you just like to briefly highlight a few of the issues which came up on the talking about in program monitoring.
Thank you. Good evening to you. It's early morning in Montreal, and it's earlier at Michael's place, so please bear with us. What we talked about during the monitoring presentation session was really trying to describe as well as possible, according to international standards, what monitoring is all about. Monitoring, as you probably know by now, is a continuous process of trying to gather information to improve, to follow a program policy at whatever level throughout its life cycle. The reasons for that are quite obvious once you start managing projects and programs and policies, is that in the end, you have to know where you're going, and therefore you have to know how well you are achieving your objectives. So over the last decades, international organizations, national ministries throughout the world have improved their monitoring system, have indeed developed systems, because traditionally everything was silo structured, and therefore they devised systems to be able to monitor at what level we're talking about, at the lowest, let's say, program level, at the policy level, at the project level. Once that is said, we also talked about the situation in Mongolia. And as Michael said, we tried to, with our discussant at the time, we tried to look at some of the challenges facing Mongolia. And we'll talk about that today also in the focusing on evaluation. But the monitoring challenge is very clear in Mongolia. There is 20,000 activities that are trying to be monitored by the now recently created agency responsible for monitoring. I think it's called governance something. Whatever the case may be, in Mongolia, the challenge, and we'll talk about that in greater detail today, focusing on evaluation and its effects on evaluation, is that monitoring at that level, at the lowest level of any project, program, or policy, creates such a flood of information that becomes unmanageable. And therefore, what we talked about for Mongolia as being the priority for the next decade or next years is really to organize in such a way that monitoring can be done so that you have a broader vision of where you're going in your projects, programs, and policies, especially given that Mongolia has numerous policies that they're trying rightly to implement. So that's more or less what we talked about during the third session. So Michael, we'll now talk about the evaluation.
All right. So I don't know if we're going to have a few minutes for any initial questions, or should we begin with the presentation?
Yes, if there's any question or any comment regarding the previous three webinars, we can proceed. But let's see, is there any comment in the chat, Nandek?
No, no,
Okay.
there is no comments in.
All right, so maybe we can proceed, Michael.
Right. Yes. So, okay. Well, thank you. So, I'm going to talk about the approaches to program and policy evaluation, which complements the previous session when we were talking about monitoring. One of our messages is that monitoring and evaluation are distinct activities, but they have to be built into an integrated system because they complement each other. So I'm going to talk about the approaches to program evaluation with international experience, and then Raymond will be talking about applications to Mongolia. So could we have the next slide, please? The next one. And the next one is thank you. So I'm going to give a brief overview. So firstly, to define evaluation. Evaluation involves assessing the extent to which the implementation of projects, programs, and policies is associated with the achievement of the intended program goals of increasing income, improving access to health, improving access to education. But it's important to understand that if the education improves because of a project which you've had in the education field, that doesn't necessarily mean that your project was responsible for producing these changes. There are many other things which are happening, other government programs, activities of other donor agencies, changes in the economy. So it's important to complement this correlation between programs and outcomes with a causal analysis to understand to what extent your program has contributed to the effects of the intervention. So there's an important distinction between the correlation and the causation. And also something which is very important, in many cases, programs don't achieve all of their intended outcomes, and it's important for evaluation to understand to what extent the failure to achieve outcomes is due to failures in the program design, or maybe the program was designed well, but there were failures in how it was implemented, or maybe you had your best efforts to implement it well, but there were factors beyond the control of the program designers and the managers, the external environment, activities of other agencies. So it's important to be understanding both whether programs achieve their objectives and if they didn't, what were the reasons for this. So the next slide, please. Thank you. So just to remind us why evaluation is important. Firstly, it provides a set of measurable and agreed upon by hopefully all of the stakeholders, indicators to assess program implementation and outcomes. This is very important because often programs don't have clearly defined objectives or measures of outcome. So coming up with a set of agreed to indicators is very important. And then developing a methodology to determine if the observed changes can be attributed to the intervention. Also, many evaluations only assess the one intended outcome of a program. Did more girls enroll in school? Did health conditions improve? But programs produce many intended and unintended positive and negative changes. So it's important to have an evaluation framework which looks more broadly at all of the outcomes, not just the one which was intended. And then finally, something which is also critical is to assess whether the program is benefiting the intended target population. Many programs may achieve increased enrollment of girls in school, of people get the cash payments, the other benefits are achieved, but very often they don't reach the intended population. Often they reach maybe the middle class families that their girls go to school, but maybe the poorest families that their girls don't go to school. So it's very important to assess who is benefiting and not just how many people. So next, please. So evaluation can be conducted at 3 levels, which have to be integrated. There's policy evaluation, where you're assessing the implementation and impacts of national and sectoral policies, national program for reducing unemployment, a sectoral program for health or education. Secondly, at the level of programs, and thirdly, at the level of projects. So all of these need to be integrated, that they're separate, but you have to look at each of the 3 levels together to see whether you're achieving your overall development strategies. Next, please. So policy evaluation is the first of the 3. It's assessing the implementation and impacts of national and sectoral policies. This is very critical, but there's a number of major challenges in evaluating policies. The first is many policies are not very clearly defined. Secondly, there's interaction among many different agencies introducing different policies, which may not always be well coordinated, and some might be competing with each other. Then could we go back? Thank you. Then another major challenge is that a policy may take 5 to 10 years to be designed and implemented. And organizationally, it's very difficult for an agency to continue to assess policies over such a long period of time. And I'll be giving an example in a moment. Then also policies change and are modified with the change of administration. So it may be that 5 years after a policy began, it's completely different because the administration has changed, the focus has changed. So again, this makes it difficult, obviously, to evaluate. And then once you've agreed on a policy, it may take several years before all of the legislation is fully implemented and all of the the administrative requirements are put in place. So again, another delay. And then finally, there are many different actors involved in defining and implementing policy. With a large program, there may be 100 or more different actors at different levels, all of whom can influence the policy, how it's implemented. And so it's very difficult to track. Many of these are at a lower level. For example, you may get a budget administrator in a municipality who just says, no, this policy is not possible because it doesn't fit into our budget categories. And so policy may never proceed because of the action of somebody often at quite a low level. So it's quite difficult to track all of the actors who are involved in policies. The next slide, please. So this is an example which we discussed earlier of the policy to address gender-based violence in El Salvador. This is just giving an example of why it can take so many years to be able to evaluate a policy. Firstly, several years were required in the case of this program for gender-based violence to identify and test components of the program at the community, municipal, and national levels. Some of the programs were working with the police, some with schools, some with community organizations. And so it was several years just to be able to identify and test the different components which you wanted to put into your gender-based violence policies. And then promoting and negotiating the legislation at the municipal and national levels took several years. It's quite a complex process. And then once you've approved the policy, the implementing the legislation and the policies at different levels can again take several years. So you can find that maybe 6 or even 7 years have gone by before the policy begins to be effectively implemented throughout the country. And so after 6 years, you can begin to evaluate the policy, whether it's been effective. Are you getting reductions in gender-based violence? Are the police improving how they report and process complaints of gender-based violence? So you need to wait another 2 or 3 years before you can see whether the program is achieving its objectives. So as you can see, it can take up to 10 years before you're really able to assess a policy, whether it's effective. And as we've already mentioned, it's very difficult within most organizations to have an evaluation which will continue over a 10-year period. So this is a real challenge of evaluating policies which are complex, which are changing, which continue over many years. So the next slide, please. So now I'd just like to talk briefly about the program and project evaluation. Previously, we talked about the policy. So there are 3 main kinds of evaluations which people discuss for policies, for programs and projects. The first, which some people call formative evaluation or implementation evaluation, is assessing the efficiency and socioeconomic effects of projects and program design and how they're implemented. So the formative evaluation continues throughout the life of the project. The second kind of evaluation, which we're familiar with at the bottom, in the green box, summative or impact evaluation. This is assessing whether the project or the program has achieved its intended outcomes and impacts, and whether these can be attributed to the activities of the project. And also linked into this very often is assessing the sustainability of programs. You don't just want to know whether the school opened, you need to know whether it was sustainable and continue to provide quality education to the increased numbers of students. So these are the 2 kinds of evaluation which we're most familiar with, the formative and the summative or the impact evaluation. Now, there's a problem of just having these 2 kinds of evaluation, in the sense that if you're...
Sorry, Michael. Just
Sure. Yeah. So the problem with the traditional impact evaluation, where you you have a baseline, and then you come back 3 years later to measure the changes, that this assumes that the program continues to be implemented as it was originally designed, but this almost never happens. Programs change when they're being implemented. The implementing agency discovers there were some problems with the program. They change the design. Maybe the communities which are affected, they suggest better ways of implementing the project. So there's a basic problem with the traditional summative impact evaluation, that what you're evaluating after 3 years is different from how the project was originally designed. So this is a big weakness, because traditionally the evaluators come in at the beginning, they do the baseline study, they go away, come back 3 years later, and they don't know what has happened during the process of implementation. So you're missing important changes which have taken place during the 3 years. So what Raymond and I recommend, which is becoming what more accepted nowadays, is process evaluation, where you're combining looking at how a program is implemented, and you're trying to understand how the process and the changes in implementation are affecting the program impacts. So process evaluation is a key component of an integrated evaluation system, which brings together the formative, the implementation evaluation, with the summative, the impact evaluation. So this is not used very widely at the moment, but it's critical, and I'm sure we'll come back to this in the discussion. So the next slide, please. Thank you. So the formative evaluation, I'm just going to briefly review the different kinds of evaluation. The formative evaluation, the implementation evaluation, this is used to provide feedback to managers on how well the program is being implemented. Also, it assesses the effectiveness of the original program design and what adjustments are needed. And it identifies problems, both internal and external, which occur during implementation. So this is a dynamic feedback system to provide information to managers to correct and improve the program as it's being implemented. During the discussion, if we have time, we can talk about the types of information which are needed and the kinds of design for the formative evaluation. But we'll come back to those if there's time in the discussion. The next slide, please. So the purposes of the summative, the impact evaluation, are the following. Firstly, to identify whether the intended changes are occurring at the time the project is being implemented. This is the correlation. But as we mentioned earlier, you need to assess to what extent there's a causal relationship between the project and the impacts. Remembering the fact that more girls go to school because you've implemented a girls' education program doesn't mean that it was your program that produced the increase in girls' attendance at school, because there are many other things happening. Maybe ADB has another project which is complementing this. Maybe the economy is improved, so parents have more money to send their children to school. So it's very important to combine the correlation. Did the number of girls going to school increase? Combine this with the causal analysis of to what extent your project or program caused these changes. And then something which is also very important, many projects are intended as pilots to assess whether a project or a program works well and whether it could be implemented in other locations. So one of the important roles of evaluation is to provide guidance on how well the project is likely to be implemented in different contexts with different population groups, different parts of the country. This is something which is very important. And if we get time to discuss, one of the weaknesses of the randomized control trials, which some people say is the best kind of evaluation, they're not able to provide much guidance on how the project could be implemented in different contexts. We can come back to that in the discussion. But providing guidance for the future is a very important aspect of the summative impact evaluation. And then again, assessing whether the benefits reach all of the sectors of the intended target population or whether some groups are excluded. It's very common that a particular ethnic group, people in remote rural areas, some of the poorest families, female-headed households, it's very common that some of the components of the target group don't benefit from a program. So you can't just say this program was successful, more girls have gone to school, more families are receiving the income supplements. You need to know whether these are the intended families or whether the benefits are going to somewhat better off people than was planned. Next slide, please. So the third kind of evaluation, the process evaluation, the uses of this are overcoming weaknesses in the pre-test, post-test designs, which ignore changes in how the program was implemented. So this is very important. Also tracking changes in project implementation and how this affects outcomes and impacts. It's really important to learn from what is going on in the field. And then providing feedback to management to correct issues with project implementation. And this is important because traditional evaluations, your evaluation report comes out at the end of the project when it's too late to make any improvements because the project is ended. So the process evaluation provides dynamic feedback to management throughout the project so that you can introduce improvements as the program is underway. And it also provides guidance to improve the design of future programs. So the next slide, please. It's important to combine quantitative and qualitative evaluations into a mixed method design because all programs, the indicators have a number of different dimensions to them. And there's no one measure which will completely capture this. So if we have a program to provide income supplements to low-income families, you need to measure the amount of money which was given to each eligible low-income household, how many families benefited. But you also need to know how accurately the families were selected. Maybe you're giving out a lot of money, but it's not going to the poorest families. You also need to know how the program is managed and how the staff interact with program beneficiaries and how the funds were used. What did families do with the money they received? So you need to have a mixed method approach where there are a number of different indicators for looking at both the quantities, but also the quality of how the program was implemented. And so we need a mixed method design, which goes beyond just numerical measures, which can be misleading. So next slide, please. So I'd like to end by just asking, if evaluation is so important, why many programs are not properly evaluated. Firstly, many impacts can't be measured until several years after the project has closed. And this is difficult organizationally to continue the evaluation after a project is closed. Rigorous evaluations are also expensive and time consuming, so very often they can't be done unless you have donor funding. Many agencies are also more interested in short-term improvements than in long-term impacts. So there's more of a demand for immediate feedback than maybe looking at what's happened after 3 or 4 years. And then many governments and international funding agencies work within 3 to 4 year planning cycles. So when the 3-4 year planning cycle ends, there's limited demand for information covering a longer period of time. People want to get on to beginning to monitor the new programs. So this is a challenge, the short operational cycles of many governments and agencies. Then there's also limited funding for evaluations and limited expertise in many agencies, including within Mongolia. So these are a number of reasons why programs are often not properly evaluated, even when everybody agrees that evaluation is important. So the next slide, please. So I will end there, and Raymond will be talking, among other things, about the need to develop an integrated national evaluation strategy, which combines capacity development with a step-by-step development and testing of the evaluation strategy. So I will end there, and we'll come back to this in the questions and discussion. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Michael Bamberger. Shall we have some questions if there is any question from the audience, or we can do it all together at the end? If there's any question from our audience, please raise your hand or just come on, open your mic. Maybe at this moment, if you do not have yet, we can move directly to Dr. Raymond Gervais' presentation. Over to you, Raymond.
Thank you. Could we move to our slides, please? Okay, thank you. Okay, let me just introduce the way that I've structured the presentation itself. First of all, obviously, as the title indicates, I want to focus on evaluation in Mongolia. Now, the challenge for me is really related to an anecdote that I want to share with you, is that I've worked, as a lot of people know, I've worked extensively with the Cabinet Secretariat at their demand after I began work with Merit. And so Merit allowed me to work with my colleagues. Now, over the years that I've worked with them from 2019 and obviously during the pandemic virtually, we exchanged ideas and actually strategies to try to improve monitoring and evaluation and results-based management, which the government had decided to implement. The anecdote is as follows. Hi, Michael. Someone pressed the wrong button. The only thing I have on my screen. Oh, okay. Okay. So when in 2022, when a sample, a delegation of Cabinet Secretariat people were sent to Singapore for a UNICEF training and evaluation, and specifically comparable to IPDET, a specific evaluation training workshop, long workshop. When they came back, I asked my colleagues, I said, well, what did you think? And one of my colleagues from Cabinet Secretariat, in charge of evaluation, by the way, said, well, it was really good, but I came to one conclusion, is that there's never been an evaluation in Mongolia. And it's from that kind of idea that I have repeatedly said there is something that has to be built in Mongolia that goes beyond what's being done now. So we're going to revisit very quickly what has been done already, and then see what needs to be done to create an evaluation system. Could I have the next screen, please? So the program is to look at, very briefly, the national legal framework. And then go through some of the other points and end up by, as Michael was saying, what must be done and why it should be done in terms of capacity development, so that there is a process of creating an evaluation system. And I'm hoping that our Mongolian discussion, Ms. Maksa, I'm not probably pronouncing it right, but anyway, I hope that will also, as a lot of what she will be saying is in Mongolian, will raise issues and raise questions. Could we have the next screen, please? Now, I've created these screens, but parallel, and I think Shinge confirmed that you sent these speaking points. Have you not, the file? Shinge?
Yes, I have sent the speaking points.
Thank you. Thank
The
you.
who registers up to 30 minutes before. So the last may not have received it, but yes, most of
no, but anyway, if a good sample of our participants has, my presentation was twofold. I created a presentation, and in parallel, some of the issues that I don't have time to address and references that are too difficult to share are in the speaking points, okay? So I want my presentation to be as brief as possible, because I've put my timing system at 20 minutes and I don't want to go beyond the 20 minutes. So if you hear a buzz and I stop in the middle of the sentence, it's because the 20 minutes is finished. So we have in Mongolia, the interesting thing since I started working with Mongolia is you have a legal framework talking about monitoring and evaluation. There was originally a resolution 89, now there's a resolution 206. They contain important, and the 206 is actually quite better than the 89, according to all of us who've looked at it and worked with it. The problem, and Michael hinted to it, is that, and you can see in the speaking notes, it's a recurrent process, it's a recurrent problem, is that in all documents, including the law of Mongolia on development policy and planning, monitoring and evaluation is considered as one process. It is not considered as being two processes, complementary but different in their perspectives and their methodologies. Monitoring is a continuous process. Evaluation is more of stopping, pulling back, looking at, are we going in the good direction? And is the information we're gathering informing us about how successful we are? Now, this problem has far-reaching consequences. First of all, it blurs people's understanding. Now, we hope, because we've worked with the Mongolian Evaluation Association, MERIT, the Cabinet Secretariat, to build a Mongolian version of the OECD DAC glossary. Now, in coming months and coming years, we're all hoping that clarification will come out of that tool so that people really understand what monitoring and evaluation are as complementary processes, but different in their perspectives and different in their approaches. Next slide, please. Thank you. So to overcome what has been a continuous discussion when I've worked with Cabinet Secretary and with the ministries in Mongolia, is that a lot of what needs to be done in terms of bettering monitoring and creating an evaluation system is linked to the fact that everything has to go through the parliament, through all of the legal negotiations that have and are still ongoing, because there is a process to modify Resolution 206. To overcome that in terms of simply monitoring, what has to be done really is to adopt a more technical approach, creating guidance notes, creating specific workshops, so that the thing is not legal. You're not seeking to change a legal framework. You're seeking to improve a system that for now is not working. And our colleague, our Mongolian discussant, will talk about that. Improving what is now flawed with weaknesses and constraints. In my perspective, and it's an international perspective, obviously, one of the greatest tools for making sure that evaluation, now we're talking about evaluation, and the evaluation system rises or is implemented, is to create an evaluation policy, is to get an evaluation policy. And if you look at the speaking notes, you'll see a table of contents of the USAID evaluation policy and some of the 3 documents that have been created by the Canadian Treasury Board for organizing the evaluation system in these 2 countries. But I could have taken all of the agencies now, the World Bank, the UNDP, etc., have evaluation policies. Now, the advantage of having that is that you're complementing the legal framework, you're harmonizing, and you're getting trainers, especially in institutions, to focus the creation of an evaluation curriculum linked to your evaluation policy. So it becomes a founding component of creating the system that we're talking about. Could we have the next slide, please? We can come back to that, okay? I mean, I'm just throwing out the ideas, and if you have the speaking notes file beside you, we can look at some of the issues here. Now, as our Mongolian, and I was quite glad to see her slide, our Mongolian discussion has adopted the approach of activities trapped. And going back to what I said about monitoring in our session 3, the challenge, and everyone recognizes that. That's what's interesting in Mongolia, is everyone recognizes. No one, well, few people have a specific strategy to move forward on this, but ultimately everyone agrees that Mongolia is not able and will never be able to manage its development activity, its development programs, projects, programs, and policies at the activities level. So that the activities trap is in Mongolia is, for me, a textbook example of how what has been discussed, and I gave references in the speaking notes, how has been discussed for the last half century in the developing country and in management sectors, how the activity traps constrains any development of monitoring, but also of evaluation. Activities evaluated, evaluations at the activity level have no meaning. A project, a program, and a policy, by definition, has a multitude of activities. And all of these have to be coherent, all of these have to be looked, coordinated, and looked at and monitored properly. The activity trap is really becoming prisoner and not keeping clear view of where you're going and why you're going in that direction. Human resources to be able to evaluate at the activity level would be enormous, would be way over any country's capacities. And that's why evaluations in the West and in international organizations are never done at the activity level. They're done at least at the large project level, program level, and ultimately at the policy level. So what the agenda for creating an evaluation system in Mongolia is to move beyond the activities. Next slide, please. One of the solutions, and Michael hinted on that, one of the solutions is for capacity building. Now, the interesting situation historically in which Mongolia is now in is that the components of capacity building have been created in the last 4 or 5 years. You have a compendium of documents. You have multiple Mongolian versions of important documents that can be used for curriculum building, for referencing to your participants or your students. You have a Mongolian glossary now. You have, in some of your resolutions, you do have a description, at least beginning of a description of competencies. Whatever. It's on your screen. So all of these elements, if brought together in evaluation policy, would allow for multiple results to be achieved, including in capacity building. So putting all of these together would, for me, be a first step towards creating an evaluation system. The steps towards that would be, obviously, to write up an evaluation policy, bringing these documents together, support to public administration. One of the things that I forgot to mention is the merit virtual training in results-based management, monitoring, and evaluation. That also is, for me, a foundation on which adding modules to that virtual training, which is already very, very important, and has trained 30,000 civil servants in Mongolia, as we're speaking, that could be used as a focus point for building modules that would be evaluation specific or specific to evaluation processes. Among the steps, ensure freedom and networking. And we'll get back to that at the end. Michael wrote a small slide at the end summarizing this. What has to be done in Mongolia, and I will deal with that in a minute, is to create an evaluation environment. And to create an evaluation environment, you need transparency. Could we have the next slide, please? Now, we said evaluation and monitoring are different. And as Michael said, and I will repeat it, they are complementary. They complete each other. So if we agree with Cabinet Secretariat's diagnostic of the situation in Mongolia, that there have never been any nationally driven evaluations, and I'm excluding, putting aside the evaluations that UNICEF or UNDP or whoever wants to do about their programs, that's different. What you want to create in Mongolia is something that is nationally driven, created, implemented by the Cabinet Secretary or any other agencies, and there have been multiple changes in the last few years, built on the notion that evaluation and monitoring are different but complementary. One important tool which is now appearing in Mongolian planning efforts are performance frameworks. So starting with the performance framework, your monitoring system will come out very naturally from your performance framework. And that monitoring system will feed your evaluation. Ultimately, your evaluation may make recommendations about improving the system, improving the workings of your project or program. Could we have the next slide, please? As where both Michael and I are thinking is that one of the ways for an evaluation system to be implemented in Mongolia is to start at the simplest form of evaluation, moving towards more complex. Trying to do an RCT, impact evaluation, at this point in time in Mongolia would be for what I would consider as being an error, methodological error, because the human resources are not there, the understanding of the complexities of these processes. But we are in Mongolia, as you all know, are doing projects. We are issuing, Mongolia is issuing policies, etc. So there is a way to move from very simple evaluations, for example, formative evaluation, process evaluation, where you are looking at the mechanics of projects, the logic, the different parts of your project or program in terms of their activities. This now is very difficult to see because of how Mongolia has been working for the last, well, since 1990. The objective of trying to do this is really to correlate evaluation objectives with proper level of internal expertise. Having enough national experts, having focal points in evaluation would facilitate achieving an evaluation system. Please. Thank you. Okay, now the transparency challenge. One, if you go back to the history of evaluation and results-based management, one of the important factors was to enhance accountability of public services and government interventions. In Mongolia, Transparency International rating is not particularly good, as you probably know. It's at 33%. That instrument, that indicator, is really focused on corruption. Okay. What you want for an evaluation system is something a bit more. And going through some of the material on Mongolia, one of the striking NGO activities that I've seen is the Open Government Partnership, and I'm hoping some of you know about it. But the latest report, the August 2023, talks about their 4th National Action Plan in terms of improving transparency, improving government accountability. It is the self-assessment, and a lot of the elements of the self-assessment have been approved by NGOs, is quite positive. But what happens is that it does not include specific objectives on transparency of government's effectiveness using evaluation reporting. Now, what you want to do, and the next slide will kind of illustrate what I'm saying, what you want to do is to convince the government and the OGB, the Open Government Partnership, to issue a 5th National Action Plan that would have specifically evaluation as a focal point, that would make available all documentation on efforts to create evaluation policy and to implement evaluations, and transparent access to evaluation reports. Point 2 being exactly that. That is something that appeared in the 35, well, a bit more than 35 years now of work I've been doing in consultancy, is that evaluation reports 30 years ago were rarely available for public. What happened with the results-based management policy statements is that transparency on specifically evaluation has immensely increased. And if you go to USAID's site, you have all the reports and you have all the evaluation reports. You have the same thing for Canada, you have the same thing for World Bank. You have to make sure you're doing a quality control of the reports and you're managing according to international standards. Please, next slide. Thank you. Now, second to last, where I'm in terms of time. Wait. I'm at 2 minutes. Okay, 1 minute a slide. Okay, quick wins. Evaluation focus capacity building. You have the documents, you have some of the tools, and I've given a list. You have laws and resolutions. They have to be improved. We all agree. Nevertheless, they're there, and they show the government is taking at least lip service to trying to improve this. The virtual training platform that was created, and I, in the speaking notes, give a few elements, would allow to link into that platform specific evaluation modules that would then improve the training, at least at the virtual level, and bring more people into thinking in terms of evaluation as being different and as being specific versus monitoring. Having a certification already exists. One step would be to have people go through the modules. The other would be to make sure that the final certification would imply that people get involved in evaluations, create conditions for evaluations to be done at whatever level, whether it's the national level, the agency level, or the AMAG level, whatever level, pushing administration to consider evaluation as being an important part of managing development of whatever they're planned. And furthermore, organizers' objective would be to have participants in as many sectors as feasible. So you would have evaluation coming out in education, health, environment, because then you would have people interested in pushing the evaluation agenda in these sectors. And the last slide, and for copyright reasons, I will admit that this was made by Michael, putting together as he's so good at. See, Nearly finished, nearly finished. Well, wait a minute, I'm gonna, okay. Okay. And that's it. No. Wait. Okay, so we've come to the conclusion that there is a limited evaluation expertise. You need to have standard policies and types of evaluation. It's annoying, sorry. If I knew how to close this thing. Sorry. Once you've, okay. Oh, I got it. So, okay. I'm 1 minute late. You need to develop standard policies, and this goes to the point of creating a proper system for evaluation documents, requests for evaluations, capacity development programs at all levels, international exchange by having people go to Singapore or Bangkok to achieve higher levels of evaluation training, and then create partnerships. And Chimbigi is certainly a specialist of developing partnerships, which explains why we're doing this today. And we are grateful for her help. She does a lot of partnership. So you do have that in your set of tools. Thank you. Last slide, please. Thank you. So I'm 1 minute late, and there's 30 seconds that have to be eliminated because I couldn't close the bloody. Anyway, listen, thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks very much, Raymond and Michael, for your very comprehensive and tailor-made presentation specific to Mongolia's cases, and just it shows how much of wealth of knowledge and wisdom you have to share with us. So we really appreciate so much for all your preparation and great works that you put into the presentation and the notes. We will also share the note again with the presentation to the as a follow-up of the learning session. So before we move to our discussion session, do we have any quick reaction or comments, burning questions from our audience? Our audience seems like, oh, good. There is a raised hand. Just learning a lot and absorbing everything you guys say. So it's good. Okay,
Yes.
please.
Sorry, I cannot give my camera because the application has some problems. Initially, I want to give my camera. It's a bit rude,
Okay,
but
no worries.
I'm sorry. So my background is I'm a public health specialist. I do research on air pollution. So like, as you mentioned, we have like national big programs. Like we had like air pollution, and environmental pollution reduction national program. So it has like 5 years program. Initially it started and they did like midterm target was like 3 years. Then it's like they want to evaluate it, but who did the evaluation is like a audition. I don't know the English name, audit. So because the program initially they targeted their indicators as they reduce cardiovascular disease a certain number and reduce the respiratory disease certain number. But at the audit office, there's nobody who has the health background. They do only the financial audit, as you say, the activity audit or activity performance-based evaluation, something like that. So I wonder if there's like really, if like very specific targeted national program which is connected to the human health or like public health issues, if the number is really crystal clear from the beginning, as the indicator is already indicated. Is it really the team of work has to do? It's like, what can be the structure of the team who is doing this evaluation? First one. And the second one is like, the second question is like, after the intermediate audit, intermediate evaluation, interim evaluation, so there's like, let's say, I think it was like only 20-something%, very low. So do they need to restructure the program again if it's really below the certain activity reached very less than 50%? Or it's like, is there any limit or the cut number, like saying if you did the midterm evaluation, then its result is really, really bad? Do you need to rewrite or refine the indicator or renew the indicator or something? I don't know if you understand my question. I'm sorry. So it's like the structure should be very much professional. People needs to be attached to the evaluation. And the second was like, if the interim result is very bad, do they need to really rewrite or renew the indicators?
Raymond?
Okay, sorry. Good questions, good questions. First question, who should do evaluations? Evaluations should be done by sector specialists and evaluation experts. Anecdote, I, for years, did training actually around the new evaluation policy for USAID. And one of the things that, as you probably know, Americans have a lot of money, and therefore they put a lot of money into going through the thousands of evaluation reports over the decades to come to one conclusion. Good evaluations are based with a harmonious exchange between sector specialists and evaluators. That was their conclusion, okay? And by the way, the evaluation report is available, transparency available on the USAID site. That was an important, for USAID, an important conclusion. That's the basis for which I say evaluations have to be done. They are successful. In my own experience, doing an evaluation in Asia, actually, with a team of evaluators in a sector I knew little about, but I knew a lot about evaluation and evaluation policy in USAID. Successful evaluations are done through the works of putting together someone who knows what an evaluation is and people who knows what the sector is all about. Now, in the case that you identified, you have double error. You don't have an evaluator and you don't have a sector specialist. So obviously you're going to have a big problem. Okay, that would be my answer to question one, and maybe Michael wants to add something. My answer to question two is that there is that constant in Mongolia, according to my experience, confusion between indicators and targets. Okay, people confuse it, and when I was doing, as people may remember, I've done quite a lot of trainings in Mongolia. People confuse the two. And what you're saying about, okay, if the indicator is very low, what you do comes, you're not correcting it, but you're better monitoring it if in your performance framework you have both an indicator and a target, so that you know what you're measuring and you know where you want to be in the next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. From this, again, dialogue between these two elements of your performance measurement framework, you will be able to come to a decision as a team as to what you're supposed to do and why this has happened. Because you have these two informations that you've designed at the planning stage by describing or stating your indicator and also stating the target that you want to achieve in year 3. Decisions then are better suited for actions in terms of modifying your policy or your program. Thank you.
Sorry.
Could I just quickly add one point? Something. This is a very good example of the importance when you're beginning an evaluation of doing a stakeholder analysis of identifying who are all of the different groups who are interested in being involved in the evaluation and what are the kinds of information that they need. So this is an example where the health research community has a very major concern about environmental issues. And so at the beginning, often you can come up with a checklist of who are the different groups who should be involved, what are their information needs. And so you could have considered including some health indicators at the beginning. The other quick point is on the the process evaluation of if you find at a certain point that you're not achieving your objectives, it's important to be able to understand, is this because the program was badly designed, badly implemented, or maybe you're unrealistic about the rate at which changes could be achieved. So it's important to be having this periodic reflections on how the program is being implemented. It could be that a very good design, but there were factors which you just couldn't overcome, or it could be that the program was designed well, but it wasn't implemented very well. So these are some of the kinds of questions to look at when you're thinking about your targets and what you've achieved. Maybe you need 5 years to achieve these targets and not 3. So there's a number of different factors to take into account, but doing periodic reviews of progress and sitting down and thinking what lessons you can draw from this are important. So thank you.
Thank you. So sorry, can I clarify, Raymond? Like you said, the indicator and result frame is 2 things, yeah? So it's, did I get it wrong, or it's like?
No. In your performance measurement framework, or in your performance framework, however you want to call it, you should have 2 important components. One is an indicator, and the other one is a target with a time period. So you are at the planning stage saying, this is what we're going to measure, and this is how we're going to measure it. Because when you describe your indicator, you have to describe how you're going to do it.
Okay.
The other component is your target. And you're going to say, well, considering what we're implementing, in 2 or 3 years' time, we want to make sure that we're going to achieve a specific result at this point in time. And that's why we put targets in performance frameworks. So by setting the 2 together at your point in time and saying, okay, year 3, we're here, oh, we're way below, or we're way over, or we're, whatever, or we're right on target, you at least have an idea of where you're standing at the exact time in your life cycle, in your projects or programs life cycle. You know exactly where you are and how close or far you are from what you had planned originally. Then you have to raise the questions which Michael hinted on. You have to raise questions on what happened. We went above, we went below, why?
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Should I raise your hand, please?
Good evening, everyone. Okay, I'd like to express my gratitude for this amazing session. And I don't have that much background related to mentoring and evaluation, but I'm a master's student studying at International Development Cooperation, and I'm interested in conducting research related to official development assistance, and I want to assess the effectiveness of official development assistance, including the soft loan and grants, and how is it effective on Mongolian economy, or Mongolian poverty rate. That kind of things I'm really interested in. So in that case, what factors should I consider, or what methodologies should I consider? And also, do you have any experience to assess official development assistance on a specific country or specific sector? Thank you.
Raymond?
Well, I don't know to what extent I can answer that question, but the very minute question you asked at the end, do I have experience in overhaul? Yes, I actually participated in what was called at the time corporate evaluation. Corporate level, well, a corporate evaluation was a either sector or country evaluation of all projects, programs that were implemented through Canadian funds. I participated in the country program, well, actually the country overview for Haiti, and then I did 2 or 3 corporate evaluation sector. And these are very, very difficult operations. So if you want, I can discuss it, but I'm not sure this platform is probably the proper place. But I would be open to answering some of your questions on a one-on-one basis.
Thank you.
Maybe I could just add very briefly, most development agencies have systems for evaluating the effectiveness of their programs. For example, the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, they evaluate all of their country programs every 4 years, because it's normally a 4-year development cycle. And so most agencies have this kind of assessment of looking at the effectiveness of their programs. The World Bank does the same, and I'm sure the Canadian government. So you can find through these agencies all of these reports are published, and then normally from time to time they will do a broader assessment of the effectiveness of their programs in a particular region or particular kinds of development assistance. So, and then a lot of the UN agencies, the OECD, DAC, and others also do these kinds of assessments. So there's a very big literature available, which you can find fairly easily. One place to start is looking at the independent evaluation offices of the different agencies, and they will have these programs usually catalogued and easily accessible.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for your questions and for the answers. And now let's move. I have also 2 questions, but I will just keep it myself. Maybe later I'll ask you. So I'd like to now move to our discussion session. But before that, I'd like to everyone to open their video and then group chat very quickly. One snap. Okay, one more time. Okay, great. Thanks very much. Okay, now, oh, sorry, Sancher, you raised your hand. Okay, please go ahead.
No problem, no problem. So I will keep it very, very short. Michael and Raymond, thank you so much. I don't actually remember the last time I nodded so often during a talk. So it was just great. Like every single point, I was just nodding all along. So for the last 4 years, I worked for UNDP, and I was responsible for innovation of the UNDP's programs. So yeah, we encountered lots of different programs and worked with National Academy of Governors, Cabinet Secretariat, etc. So we observed that there were lots of difficulties, especially in terms of like political will and how people and especially public officials understand evaluation in itself. So what's the purpose of evaluation is it was just implicit, right? Nobody would really talk about it. So from what I saw, it was mostly for reporting purposes, and it was kind of a, yeah, some foreign countries do it, we as well do it. So that kind of attitude towards evaluation. So my question is a little bit more detailed. You talked about connecting the evaluation courses with real-time civil service officials time frame and monitoring, right? Can you talk a little bit about more that and how would that work really in terms of like time specifics, etc., life cycle of a public servant or a life cycle of a project, or yeah. Thank you.
Raymond, is that?
We're just throwing out ideas. And Michael and I, when we talked about this presentation, we said what we want to avoid, and Michael has really good examples of how in certain countries, capacity building was in one sector, for example, education. I mean, he can talk about it. In one sector, what we're trying, what he and I have tried to look at is, okay, how do we make it real? How do we make evaluation part of what certain civil servants will choose to do? Okay, and so in many countries, including mine, what happened is that, if I take a Canadian example, in 2000 there was results-based management policy statement. From that, all public administration schools redid their curriculum so that they would then produce people who were eventually going to do, either results-based management itself or evaluation of results-based management planned projects, policies, and programs. Okay, so from that point on, what you had is a system where civil servants were asked to know what evaluation was all about. Not necessarily doing evaluations, but planning evaluations. And this is the work I did when I did the training for USAID. We were asked to do a training of evaluation to planners to create either focal points in USAID offices, country offices, or simply having managers understand what all this is all about. Public administration schools in the States, after they did their own results-based management policy statement in Canada, created loads of people that went into either public sector or the private sector. In both cases, the objective was to have the two able to discuss what an evaluation was. The big difficulty in Mongolia, from my perspective, was that when you talked about evaluation, there was an incredible misunderstanding of what evaluation was. Okay, so you had a situation where people, and that happened to me, just a quick anecdote. I was doing a training and I said, oh, this module, this presentation that we'll be doing today is on evaluation. Has anyone done evaluations? And all of them would put their hands up. They would all say, oh, we've done evaluations. And I said, oh, that's very interesting. So you're gonna have a lot of things to discuss with me, won't you? Oh, yes, we'll have a lot of these things to discuss. We went through the module, and at the end, I asked the same question. I said, have you ever done any evaluations like you saw in a module? And he said, we've never done that before. And that's the size of that misunderstanding. What you need to create for an evaluation system to be implemented is to be able to have people who are talking the same talk and walking the same walk. If not, then you're having people writing stupid, as I've seen in the past, stupid requests for proposals, not being able to understand what an evaluation report is all about, etc., etc. On the other side, having evaluators with proper certification. with a proper understanding, a valid understanding, both in practice and in theory. And that's why we suggested, Michael and I suggested, that if you're going to create evaluation modules linked to the virtual training that is now in the hands of the Cabinet Secretariat, then you need to encourage people, to push people to to work in evaluations, to in fact be part of an evaluation process, either the planning or the implementation of itself. Michael?
Yeah, just two very quick points. I know we're getting short of time. I've worked on looking at how evaluation systems have developed in a number of different countries, and there seem to be sort of two main approaches. One approach is to decide that evaluation is going to be introduced across the board in all sectors at the same time. The other approach is to look at sectors where there's already evaluation experience. There's a number of countries where, for example, evaluation was more advanced in the education sector, which I think is quite common in a lot of places. And so to begin with focusing on a particular sector to demonstrate how you can develop a system and what are some of the outcomes. I've seen a number of countries, like, for example, Mexico. They decided we're going to set up an evaluation system and every program has to be evaluated every year. And it was just chaos. I mean, some programs had only been started 2 months ago, but they were told they have to go and evaluate it. So the other extreme was Uganda, where they had a very strong education evaluations, and they built on that and used this as an example to show people, you know, what could be the benefits. So that's one approach, or two different approaches. The other point, which I have a slightly different way of using the term quick wins, which is to identify initial evaluations where you could demonstrate some benefits from doing an evaluation fairly quickly, and which are not too complicated, and importantly, not too controversial. I've worked a lot on gender evaluations, and many people are very nervous because they think if you get into gender, particularly if you're a man, you think that you're going to start getting lectured by women in your organization. You should be ashamed. You don't respect women. So a lot of people say, no, we don't want to get into gender because these problems. So finding an evaluation which is not going to be controversial. We began in Africa, where we were looking at gender and transport. We showed that there's a very high post-harvest loss from women farmers because they don't have access to transport to get their products to market. So that turned out to be a good evaluation to begin with, because this was not controversial. You're not talking about sexual harassment and women's rights. You're talking about most of the food in rural Africa is produced by women farmers. There's a very high percentage of loss because they can't get it to market. So that was an example of a quick win where you could very quickly demonstrate the great benefits if you had some transport, like building a trailer which you could put on the back of a bus so that women could get their produce to markets. Quick results, not very controversial, and something where people say, we could do that. It's not too difficult. Everybody in the village knows why women can't get their goods to market. So rather than beginning, we're going to do evaluations everywhere, and it's many years before you see any useful results, try to find these quick wins so people can see that it can be done. It's not too expensive, it's not too controversial, and there's some results which you can use. So I think this concept of the quick wins is helpful, combined with this thinking about, are you going to begin across the board, or are you going to try and identify some sectors where there's already the experience? There are pros and cons of that. If you only work in education, there's all sorts of political issues from other sectors and so on. So you have to balance that carefully. But those are just a couple of thoughts for.
Great. Thanks very much. All right, we are over time, but hopefully you kindly will be able to stay another 15 minutes because our discussion, Ms. Nandan Chimik will have a reaction and also introduce some points using her slide. So over to you, Ms. Nanda. I will share the screen for you.
Thank you. So good evening, and maybe Michael and Raymond, good morning or yeah, good afternoon. So thank you for the Miss Chimge and her team inviting me for this a very important event as a discussant. So I always found this presentation and discussion from this webinar extremely useful. So I hope like all the participants are same. So and also I would like to thank this Mr. Raymond and Michael. So bringing this such important issues in our table, and then openly sharing this your experience, international experience, and then what you discussed and what your concern is actually, and also advices were just what we needed, what we needed. So in Mongolia context. So generally, I think this MEA is a kind of the very big, famous or big areas. So I would say, so the UA professional people just summarized those themes in very effective way and presented it very efficient way to our audience, to our participants. So and also I want to highlight some of the key, some message that the topics that you mentioned. For example, this the Mr. Michael. So you mentioned like an unintended or intended result from the project intervention. So this is kind of the very important exercise during the evaluation. So we all know this as evaluator. So, but also I think to my experiences, it's also very important during the monitoring, because my personal experience when I doing this evaluation with my clients. So one of the respondents, evaluation, the project team, the implementer. When I ask okay, what's your the unintended or intended changes resulted from your project? Or it could be positive, or it might be negative. So, but the unintended means like those responded say oh, I never thought what's the unintended changes? So negative and the positive. So because mostly like an implementer, they think think about more focusing on intended changes. Never think about unintended changes. So I think this one is very good exercise for the monitoring wise and monitoring phases. The people can see this as the results. We're doing this, but what's that unintended changes happened because of the project. So this is a kind of things we have to, and also we have to consider during the monitoring the phases. Other thing is that Mr. Raymond mentioned it about the policy evaluation, which is, I think this policy evaluation is a very new area that we have to build our capacity, and also we have to build this long-term strategy to evaluate the policy, because itself, you mentioned the policy, its formulation, implementation of the policy, it took decades, and also it needs a very strategic framework for evaluating, monitoring this policy implementation. That's why I think this is one of the area that we need to learn more detailed research on this as a evaluator or as a implementer, I think. And also why this policy evaluation to me is interesting, and the subject that we need to focus. It's, the Mongolia, we are a country and politically very unstable. So which means our policies are very unstable. The changing every 4 years, policy and legal, those key documents have been changing. So which means it's really challenging when we evaluating this result or impact of the policy. Between those period, everything is changing. The human resource implementers changed, key guidance are changing. That's why it's really inconsistent. the measuring this result and impact of the policy. Yeah, this is, I think, this the things, issues or things that we need to consider in the future. So, so I just prepared just one presentation based on the topic that Mr. Raymond mentioned, activity trip. So this term is actually very interesting, very, I would say the new, not new, like, topics that we never discussed, because most of the, this, for the monitoring and evaluation is data reliability and the credibility, timelines, it's very important. But when to me, it's most of our project, implemented or executed by government agency, it's mostly based on activities. Okay, let's say there's 4 years project, but now is, for example, this project management team, like project steering committee, they like in every year they're, approving this annual plan of the project, but they actually, when they're approving the annual plan, they're actually putting their wish list, which is changing this activities year by year. So which is totally affecting this project overall terms of theory of change, because theory of change is one of the, for the project, it's kind of Bible, the key documents. But what I'm going to trying to say is like the most of the project development project in Mongolia, the people when they're designing the project, they're really not spending much time or effort on design stage. They just design the project proposal and then submit, and then they really want to okay, let's implement, that's it. Which means design phase is a very important phase of the entire design, entire like lifespan of the project implementation. That's why I think we're not spending much time on theory of change. That's why we are easily losing our control, losing our direction. Where what is our desired state? Where we want to go? Where we want to what are the result we want to achieve? So I think this is one of the key reasons that most of the project becoming activity driven to me. And also another situation is the people in just when they just developing this monitoring evaluation plan, they're not really formulating these indicators adequately. So most of to me, that's my experience, most of the log frames and design document, monitoring evaluation plan, these indicators are poorly defined, poorly formulated. That's why I think this is the core of the cause of the why the project becoming activity driven or poorly developed. So, so as we discussed, as a presenter, so since most of our audience is Mongolian, so I will just wrap up what I'm just having a thought on this general, like in our today's webinars in Mongolian. So, би тэгээ нөгөө яг ер нь нөгөө ихэнх аудиенс маань Монголоор очроос яг ярьж байгаа юм товчхон базаад хэлчихээ. Тэгээд надад бол цөөхөн 10 минут үлдсэн учраас яг одоо саяны нөгөө хоёр одоо хэлцүүлэгчийн илтгэгчийн илтгэл дотроос нь одоо хамгийн бас бид нэр анхаарах ёстой зүйл нь болохоор манай их үйл ажиллагаа маань activity driven буюу ерөөсөө үйл ажиллагаан дээр суурилсан үйл ажиллагаа нь яг нөгөө төслийнхаа зорилтод одоо хүрх үр дүндээ одоо хүрэхээргүй байнга өөрчлөгддөг. Тэгээд ихэнх цагаа нөгөө үйл ажиллагаа зарцуулдаг учраас үндсэн яг хяналт үнэлгээний өндөр түвшний буюу high level, outcome level, impact level-ийнхаа бид нар бас яг бүтцийг ерөөсөө харж чадахгүй ингээд 2-3 жил ч юм ингээд төслийн нийт хугацааг өнгөрөөчдөг. Тэгээ энэ нь болохоор ерөөхдөө төслийн яг дараагийн яг эцсийн үнэлгээ болоход бол хамгийн их одоо зөрүүтэй гардаг буюу gap гардаг хэсэг байдаг. Тэгээ энийг бол би яг манай хоёр элтгэгч маань бас яг Монголд ялангуяа Raymond бол Монголд бол одоо бас ажилласан experience тийм манай Монголд байдаг ихэнх төслүүдийн бас ийм одоо тулгамдж асуудлыг харсан байна гэж миний хувьд бол харсан. За тэгээд ер нь бол яг цаашдаа энэ үйл ажиллагаа төслийн үйл ажиллагаагаа илүү үр дүнтэй за хяналтаа үр дүнтэй хийх за тэгээд үнэлгээгээр үнэн бодиттой мэдээлэл үр дүнгээ харахын тулд төслүүдэд бол ер нь урт хугацаанд буюу outcome-ийн түвшин тийм ээ энэ impact түвшнийхаа индикаторын дээр илүү яг фокусж анхаарах хэрэгтэй. Энэ дээр маш сайн дата мэдээлэл цуглуулдаг байвал хэрэгтэй гэж харж байгаа. За тэгээд ихэнх төслүүдийн миний туршлагаар бол ихэнх төслүүд болохоор яг нөгөө өөрийнхөө төсөл дээрээ суурилсан ийм дата цуглуулдаг. Тэр нь өөртөө ч амархан байдаг. Бас тэхээс аргагүй нэг шалтгаан гэх юм бол яг үндэсний хэмжээнд ийм одоо яг одоо reliable гэдэгтэй ийм одоо бодит за яг ийм үнэн магадлалтай ийм одоо дата мэдээлэл тэр болгон бага байдаг. Тийм учраас яг төсөл дээрээ суурилсан дата цуглуулдаг. Тэгээд тэр нь болохоор ийм энэ хяналт үнэлгээний датаны үндсэн нөгөө зарчимд нь нийцэхгүй өөрөөр аргаар авдаг. Тэгээд үйл ажиллагаа нь өөрчлөгдөг учраас нөгөө мэдээллийн би түрүүний нэг оролцогч бас одоо индикатор дээр ингээд хүрсэн өөрөөр болсон гэж ах шиг үлдээ. Энэ бол миний одоо бас яг одоо туршлагаар болвол ихэнхдээ нөгөө үйл ажиллагаа маш их сольж холдог. Тэгээд тэр логикийг ингээд алдагдуулдаг учраас ягаад гэвэл theory of change бол бүх тэр логикийг ингээд багцаар нь харж анх дизайн хийхдээ тэгж гаргадаг. Тэгээ энийг л алдагдуулчихлаар индикаторын дээш доош олоод хүрхгүй болоод гэдэг ч юм уу ийм зүйл харагддаг. Тэрнээс биш хүмүүсээ түрүүний хэлсэн төслийн ч юм уу үнэлгээ хийхэд ер нь бол нэг зарчим бол хувь хүний нөгөө одоо хин ажиллаа сайн хийдэг муудаг бол үнэлгээнд бол хамаагүй байдаг. Индикатороо зөв тодорхойлох, хурц буюу таргетаа зөв тавих, тэгэд бусад одоо assumption буюу төслийн бусад эрсэл гадна эрсэл assumption-ыг маш сайн тооцоолсон байх юм бол ер нь бол индикатортай хүрнэ гэж үздэг. Индикатор биелэгдэнэ гэж үздэг. За тэгээд бас нэг зүйл юм бол яг төслүүдээр харагддаг нэг зүйл бол тэрэ яг M1-ийг бол яг M1 хүн ингэж хардаг. Гэтэл яг энэ тайлан одоо үр дүнгээ харах, тайлагнах энэ процесс бол ерөөсөл багийнх байдаг. Тийм учраас тэгэн дөрөв бас ихэн Raymond бас хэлжсэн энэ хяналт үнэлгээ гэдэг чинь үнэлгээч тэр мониторч тэр ерөөсөл техникийн хүн за тэгээд M1 мэддэг ийм одоо чадвартай одоо мэдлэгтэй хүн гэх юм уу M1 evaluator гэдэг ч юм. Энэ хоёр хүний ингээд зөв комбинац л ерөөсөө баг одоо тухайн төслийн хяналт үнэлгээг бол одоо төгсгөлөөс нь эхнээс нь аваад төсөл хүртэл үр дүнтэй явах ийм гол шалтгаан гэж би сардаг. За тэгээд нэг зүйл гэх юм бол хамгийн төгсгөлд нь бид нар одоо яг энэ хяналт үнэлгээнд дээр төслийн хүрээндч тэр одоо төслийн ажилтны хүрээндч тэр гаднаас нь ч тэр ер нь ингээд мэдээлэл анализ хийсэн мэдээлэл нөгөө disseminate буюу одоо төслийнхаа оролцогч талуудад харуулах одоо тэдэнд түгээх асуудал дээр бас айгүйх яалтдаг одоо бас юм тэр бол оновчтой гаргадгүй юм байна гэж бодс одоо бас туршлагаасаа харсан. Тэгээ их хвчлэн гэж олон хуудас тайлан бичил нөгөөх нь хинч уншихгүй тэгээд ямар үр дан гарсан бэ гэдгийг бол нөгөө шийдвэр төвшний менежментийн төвшний хүмүүст асуудаг. Тэгэхээр энэ бол хамгийн бас яг мэдээлэл буюу одоо тайлан үр дүнгээ мэдээлэл дүүн шинжилгээгээ зөв үр дүнтэй танилцуулах бол аюул чухал гэж үзэж байгаа. За миний ярих юм бол ерөөдөө ингээд тавьчих юм байлаа. Тэгээд би энэ сүүлийн энэ одоо поинттойгоо холбоотой би яаж шеэр болох вэ нэг
болно та шууд шеэрлж.
За би энэ дээр скрин шийдтэй. Энэ дээр байгаа лөө. За share screen. За. Би тэгээд яг энэтэй нөгөө юутай холбоотой бас яг нөгөө түрүүний хэлсэн нөгөө бид нар анализ хийсэн мэдээлэл нөгөө зөв хүмүүсэд танилцуулах тий оновчтойгоор танилцуулах гэдэг би нэг одоо жишээ харуулсан. Тэгээд ер нь одоо нөгөө энэ бол илүү нөгөө мониторингтай холбоотой гэсэн үг. Тэгээд бид нар дата мэдээллийг илүү ингээд нөгөө одоо хэрэглэгч буюу тий партнеруудтай яг юу хүсэж байгаа ямар мэдээлэл байх ёстой тэр бүх цогцоор нь ингэж өгдөг disseminate хийж чадах юм бол яг хяналт үнэлгээ бас одоо хүмүүсийн хэлж байгаа шиг тийм одоо сайн боллоо муу л гэдэг ч юм уу те эсвэл үнэлгээ олоход төсөл маань яах болоо гэдэг ч юм ийм санаа зовх зүйл гарахгүй гэж боддог. Тийм учраас ер нь бол мэдээлэл disseminate би хамгийн их төгсгөлд нь бол яг хүмүүс түгээх гэдэг бол зөв түгээх гэдэг бол аюул чухал гэдгийг бас яг энэ нөгөө хоёр илтгэл дээр нэмээд өөрийнхөө одоо experience гэх юм уу да энийг одоо хуваалцгаад юм байна. За миний хувьд болчлаа нөгөө 10 минут нэг л болчлаа.
Маш их баярлалаа Нандин чимэг. Тэгэхээр манай одоо өөрөө уншид монголоор ярьсан явчихсан. Thanks very much to our discussant Ms. Nandin Chimig. Yeah, very rich and quick information about based on her rich experience. What are the real challenges, and also I really liked the last slide you shared about. I think you did it yourself, right? You do the dashboard, so it's just a great efficient way of have the whole picture of the project cycle as timeline can be shown on one interface. So yeah, any question from our audience to Ms. Nanda? Or any comment? Okay, maybe okay, there's one in the chat. Let's see. Okay. Nope.
Чат дотор бичсэн ба зүгээр газ тайлбарлчих гэсэн 10 секундэд энэ зөв чат дотор бичсэн хүмүүс гайхаж байгаа бол би нэг тоглоом болгоод бичсэн байхгүй. Theory of change дотор нь ерөөсөө ямар ч theory байдгүйгээд нөгөө уул нь бол ингээд тэрийг хэрвээ ideally so okay I'll talk in English. So basically my half joke was that usually there is very little or no theory in theory of change, because ideally if you do it properly, any of those lines could be some social science theory or some hypothesis, right? But nobody does that in that comprehensive way because it's just time and resource intensive would be probably. So usually what is theory of change is just there is no theory. It's just graph of different graph with different lines and direction lines, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, that was my half joke. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting observation.
Yeah, it's this theory of change is internationally, it's a very complex exercise, a very important exercise. We have to spend, even my experience, some of my the project experience, they spent like in 1 year just for developing theory of change, just for designing the project. So the people, for example, there's when people just ask, what's the success indicator? Why did project like fail, for example? So I would say mostly I said, okay, it's because of design. Because of design, you know, you spend just in one month on design stage and then you fail it in 5 years. Yeah, that's it. That's why the people never, give attention. Generally never attention to how important the terms of reference, how important like designing stage. This is the biggest factor why the project is failing.
Right. Well, this comes to the conclusion of our learning session of the first learning session of the 2024, and I really would like to thank again our great two presenters, Dr. Raymond and Dr. Michael, who did 4 series of learning session for the Mongolian Evaluation Association and our members, and like this is an open event, so everybody from, I can see also from some of Africa, some Europe, they were joining. So it's indeed a good public good, and that you are creating for all of us to promote education and evaluation. Thanks so much on behalf of all of us. And also thank you very much, Ms. Nanda, for your time and effort to come on as a discussant and showing your great works, and also real life comments from the field. And thanks very much for all our participants for very engaging and good questions. And this session was fully recorded, so it will be sent to you with the notes and presentation PPTs of our speakers hopefully tomorrow. So as soon as possible, everything is done in orderly form. So we will see you all again in February. We have also good speakers lined up, so hopefully we will be seeing you every month with the learning session. Thanks very much. Have a good day, Michael, Raymond, and everyone. Have a good night. Bye.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jimge.
Thank you.
Сайхан босоогоорой. Монголд байгаа хүмүүс нь.